The coffee cup exploded against James Carter's chest at exactly 7:43 in the evening. Ceramic shattered on impact, hot liquid soaking through flannel already stiff with 14 hours of road grime and desperation.
Careful, light
The
is getting
shards
brighter.
scattered
We need to
across
go
polished
now.
marble like broken teeth, and for one suspended second, the private terminal at Teterboro went silent, except for the sound of his daughter screaming. Emma's voice cut through the stunned quiet, high and sharp with terror. Not the cry of a child who'd been hurt, but the raw sound of an 8-year-old watching her father attacked by a stranger for reasons she couldn't begin to understand. James felt the heat spreading across his sternum, then the sharp sting where a piece of ceramic had opened his collarbone. Blood seeped warm against his skin. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't even wipe the coffee from his face. Christine Reynolds stood 6 feet away, arms still extended from the throw, chest heaving with a rage that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with who she thought he was. Designer suit worth $3,000, platinum hair shellacked into submission, terminal manager badge catching the overhead lights like a badge of authority she'd confused with permission to judge, to gatekeep, to decide which human beings deserved basic dignity. Her finger jabbed toward the exit. "I said get out! This is a private terminal, not a shelter for deadbeat fathers." James looked down at Emma. Her small hands gripped the straps of her pink backpack so tight her knuckles had gone white. Those green eyes, Rachel's eyes, were filling with tears that spilled over and tracked down pale cheeks. She'd dressed herself this morning in the dark at 3 a.m. because they'd had to leave before sunrise, and her socks didn't match. One pink, one purple. She'd been so proud when she climbed into the truck, telling him she was a big girl now and could help get ready all by herself. His daughter, his whole world, the only thing that mattered. "Daddy," the word came out broken. "Daddy, you're bleeding." James touched his collarbone. His fingers came away red. The cut wasn't deep, but it was real. And Christine Reynolds had just committed assault in front of approximately 30 witnesses without a flicker of conscience. "It's okay, sweetheart." "It's not okay," Christine snapped. She turned to the security desk where 2 guards stood frozen with the uncertainty of men who weren't sure whose side they were supposed to be on. "Johnson, Reeves, remove them now." The guards looked at each other, then at James, then at the little girl crying beside him. Johnson cleared his throat, his face conflicted. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" "I gave you an order." James finally looked at Christine. Really looked. She was 46 years old, though she'd never admit it. Hair colored to hide the gray, face tightened by procedures that cost more than most people earned in months. Wedding ring missing, but the tan line still visible. Divorce still fresh enough to bleed. She was a woman who'd built her entire identity on control, on being the gatekeeper, on deciding who belonged and who didn't. And James Carter, in his wrinkled flannel and muddy work boots, with his 3-day beard and exhausted eyes, and his daughter in mismatched socks, James Carter did not belong. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was so calm it made Christine take a half step back. "I have boarding authorization for the Gulfstream on pad 7. She laughed. The sound was sharp, brittle, ugly in a way that made Emma flinch closer against his leg. "A boarding authorization." Christine repeated the words slowly, like explaining something to a simpleton. "You have boarding authorization for a $65 million aircraft?" "Yes." "Show me." James reached into his jacket pocket slowly, deliberately. The guards tensed, but he just pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges from being carried close. He held it out. Christine snatched it from his hand. Her eyes scanned the document, lip curling with each line. Then she crumpled it in her fist. "This is fake." "It's not. Anyone can print a document, sweetheart." The endearment dripped with venom. "You think I was born yesterday? You think I can't spot a grifter when I see one?" Emma tugged at James's hand, her voice small and frightened. "Daddy, I want to go. Please, I want to go." James knelt down. The coffee was still dripping from his shirt, the cut on his collarbone still bleeding, but he knelt and took his daughter's face in his hands with all the gentleness he possessed. "Lily, look at me." She looked, those green eyes so full of trust it made his chest ache. "We're going to get on that plane, and we're going to get to the hospital, and everything is going to be okay. Do you believe me?" Her lip trembled. "But that lady..." "That lady made a mistake. People make mistakes when they're scared." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "But we don't have to be scared of her, okay?" "Okay." He kissed her forehead, then stood back up. Christine was watching them with an expression that had shifted from rage to something more dangerous. The righteousness of someone absolutely certain they were doing the right thing, protecting this terminal, this space, these real clients from an intruder who had no business breathing the same air. "Johnson," she said without taking her eyes off James, "I want them escorted out. If they resist, call the police." "Ma'am." "Now." Johnson and Reeves moved forward, not aggressively, but like men approaching a situation they wanted no part of. James didn't back up, didn't raise his hands, didn't do anything except stand there with one hand still holding his daughter's. "Sir," Johnson said quietly, "maybe it would be best if you just..." "Wait." The voice came from behind them. Young, female, trembling but determined. Everyone turned. Amy Chen stood at the gate desk, clutching a clipboard like a shield. 28 years old, recently divorced, perpetually exhausted from working 2 jobs to support a daughter she rarely saw. Right now, she was terrified. Her hands shaking so hard the clipboard rustled like leaves in wind. But she was also holding a printout, and she was looking at Christine with something that might have been courage or might have been desperation. "Miss Reynolds," she said, "I checked the manifest." Christine's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "The manifest. For the Gulf Stream. I checked it when he came in." Amy swallowed hard, and James could see her throat work. "His name is on it." The terminal went quiet. Not silent. There were still people in the background, travelers and staff frozen mid-motion, watching the scene unfold like witnesses to a slow-motion car accident. But the noise seemed to pull back, leaving only the 4 of them in a bubble of tension that felt like it might explode. "What did you say?" Victoria's voice had gone to ice. Amy flinched but held her ground. "James Carter. It's on the manifest. Blind charter, level 3 clearance. I verified it twice. The system accepted it. The system glitches. But the system is wrong, Amy." Christine stepped toward her, and Amy actually recoiled. "That's why we have judgment. That's why we have training. That's why we have people in positions like mine to make decisions." She gestured at James without looking at him. "Does that look like a man who belongs on a private aircraft?" Amy's eyes flicked to James, to the coffee stains spreading across his chest, to the blood trickling down toward his collar, to the little girl hiding behind his leg. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't exactly. Remove them. No. Everyone stopped. James hadn't shouted, hadn't raised his voice at all, but the word landed like a thunderclap anyway, sharp and final. No. Christine's face twisted into something ugly. You don't get to say no to me. This is my terminal, my domain. I decide who boards and who doesn't. She jabbed a finger at his chest, right where the coffee had soaked through. And you don't even belong in the parking lot. James looked at her finger, then at her face. You threw a cup of coffee at me in front of my daughter. You're lucky I didn't throw something harder. You made my daughter cry. She'll get over it. You drew blood. Christine glanced at his collarbone where the cut was still seeping red. Something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, but awareness. The awareness that things might have gone too far, that there might be consequences. But she was too deep in now, too committed. Backing down meant admitting she was wrong, and Christine Reynolds did not do that, had never done that, would never do that. You should have left when I told you to. Her voice was steel. Whatever happens now is your own fault. James nodded slowly. I'll remember you said that. Is that a threat? It's a statement. Johnson, Reeves, wait. Another voice, deeper, more authoritative. A man emerged from the security office, mid-40s, military bearing, eyes that had seen things and cataloged them for later. His badge read Daniels, security chief. Number Martinez. Chief Martinez. What the hell is going on here? Christine straightened, automatically smoothing her suit. Chief Martinez, I was just removing a trespasser who... I heard. Martinez's eyes swept the scene with practiced efficiency. The coffee stain on James's shirt, the blood on his collarbone, the crying child, the crumpled paper in Christine's hand. I heard everything. Something shifted in Christine's expression, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through the righteous armor. Then you understand why I understand that you assaulted a man in front of approximately 30 witnesses. I didn't assault. You threw a coffee cup at him. His chest is soaked. He's bleeding. That's assault, Miss Reynolds. Martinez's voice was flat, professional, and absolutely devastating. And you did it before verifying his authorization. His authorization is fake. Give me the paper. Christine hesitated. Then slowly, like a child caught cheating, she handed over the crumpled document. Martinez unfolded it, smoothed it against his leg, read it. His eyebrows rose. He read it again, then pulled out his tablet and began typing. The seconds stretched. Christine's composed mask began to crack at the edges. The guards exchanged glances. Amy gripped her clipboard tighter. Emma tugged at James's hand. Daddy, what's happening? We're waiting, sweetheart. For what? For the truth. Martinez finished typing. He looked at his screen, then at James with an expression that had completely transformed from suspicion to something approaching respect. Mr. Carter, he said carefully, can you confirm your destination? Santa Fe Children's Hospital. Christine scoffed. Oh, please. What is he selling? Magazines for Miss Reynolds? Martinez's voice cut like a blade. Stop talking. She actually took a step back. Martinez turned his full attention to James, and there was something in his face now. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. The look of one veteran identifying another. Sir, this charter is listed as sealed. Level 3 clearance. Priority medical transport. He paused. The manifest shows 1 adult passenger and 1 minor requiring critical medical attention. James nodded. Your daughter? Yes. Martinez looked at Emma, at her pale face, at the dark circles under her eyes that James had been too exhausted to notice that morning, at the way she was leaning against her father like standing was an effort. "The critical medical transport," Martina said quietly. "How long does she have?" James's jaw tightened. 68 hours. There's a donor match waiting. First one in 3 years. The terminal had gone completely silent now. Not even the background noise of travelers, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of aircraft engines. Christine's face had gone pale, all the blood draining away as the reality of what she'd done crashed down on her. I didn't know." "You didn't know." James turned to her, and for the first time, something other than calm entered his voice. Not anger, something worse, something quieter. "You didn't think. You didn't care." "How was I supposed to?" "You weren't supposed to do anything except your job." James stepped toward her, and she stumbled backward. "You weren't supposed to look at a man and his sick daughter and decide they didn't deserve to be here. You weren't supposed to throw a coffee cup at a father trying to save his child's life. You weren't supposed to make her cry." "I was protecting the terminal from what?" James's voice rose finally, just enough to make everyone flinch. "From a dad in a flannel shirt? From a little girl in mismatched socks? From people who don't look like they belong in your precious little world?" "Mr. Carter," Martinez started. "No." James shook his head. "No, she needs to hear this." He looked back at Christine, and his eyes were burning. "My daughter dressed herself this morning in the dark because we left at 3 a.m. Our original flight was canceled 30 minutes before boarding because someone didn't want us to reach Santa Fe in time." Christine's face went even paler. "What? What are you saying?" "I'm saying I drove 14 hours through the night with a sick child. I'm saying I haven't slept in 36 hours. I'm saying we're running out of time." His voice dropped. "And when I walked into this terminal, finally, at our last possible chance, you looked at my clothes and decided I was garbage." Tears were streaming down Christine's face now, cutting tracks through her makeup. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know." James stepped back. The fire in his eyes was dying down, replaced by exhaustion so deep it seemed to reach his bones. Martinez cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to personally escort you and your daughter to the aircraft." James nodded slowly. "Thank you, Miss Reynolds." Martinez turned to her, and his face had gone professional again, carefully neutral. "You're relieved of duty pending investigation. Don't leave the facility." Christine opened her mouth to protest. Then she saw the faces around her, the guards, the staff, the passengers who had watched everything. And whatever she was going to say died in her throat. She nodded just once and turned away, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. James looked down at Emma. "Come on, sweetheart. It's time to go." "Daddy?" Her voice was so small. "Is that lady going to be okay?" James closed his eyes for a moment. Even after everything, the coffee and the cruelty and the tears, his daughter was worried about the woman who had hurt them. "I don't know, baby. That's up to her." He took her hand and they began to walk. Amy watched them go, her own eyes wet. As they passed her desk, she stepped forward. "Mr. Carter?" James paused. "I'm sorry," Amy said. I should have said something sooner. I should have stopped her." James studied her face. The guilt, the shame, the desperate wish to go back and do it differently. "You spoke up," he said. "That's more than most people do." "It wasn't enough." "It never feels like enough." James reached out and squeezed her shoulder briefly. "Next time, it will be." Then he was gone, walking toward the glass doors with his daughter beside him. their silhouettes growing smaller against the gray light of the rain outside. Amy watched until she couldn't see them anymore. Then she looked at Christine, who was sitting in a chair by the wall now, head in her hands, shoulders shaking. Then she looked at Martinez. "Chief?" "Yeah?" "What's going to happen to her?" Martinez sighed. "That depends." "On what?" "On what else we find out about that canceled flight." Amy frowned. "You think it's connected?" Martinez didn't answer. He just turned and walked toward his office, already pulling out his phone. Amy stood alone at her desk, clipboard still in her hands, trying to make sense of what she'd just witnessed. A man in dirty clothes, bleeding from where a coffee cup had cut him. A little girl with 68 hours to live. A woman who had looked at them and seen nothing but trash. And something else. Something in the way James had spoken, the way Martinez had reacted, the way the tablet had changed everything. Something more was happening here. Something that had only just begun. Outside, the rain was falling harder now. James and Emma stood under the awning, waiting for Martinez to bring around the security cart that would take them to the aircraft. The cold air bit through James's wet shirt, making him shiver, but he didn't complain. He just held his daughter's hand and watched the water stream down the windows. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart?" "Why did she hate us?" James looked down at her innocent face, her confused eyes, her trembling lip. He'd spent so many years trying to protect her from this, from the ugliness that lived in people, from the snap judgments and the cruel assumptions and the way some decided your worth before you ever opened your mouth. He'd failed. "She didn't hate us, baby." "Yes, she did. I could see it." James sighed. She was scared. "Scared of what?" "Scared of people who don't look like her. Scared of things she doesn't understand. Scared of being wrong." He squeezed her hand. "Fear makes people do ugly things." "But we're not scary." "No, we're not." "So why was she scared of you?" James knelt down, ignoring the way his knees ached, ignoring the cold water soaking through his jeans. He took both of Emma's hands in his. "Listen to me. Some people look at the outside of things and think they know the inside. They see dirty clothes and think dirty person. They see tired eyes and think lazy. They see different and think wrong." Emma nodded slowly. "That's dumb." James almost laughed. "Yeah, it is. Mommy used to say you can't judge a book by its cover." Mommy was smart. She also said that people who judge too fast usually feel bad about themselves. James felt his throat tighten. Rachel. God, he missed her. She said that? Uh-huh. She said people who are really happy don't need to make other people sad. Emma tilted her head, considering. Maybe that lady is really unhappy. Maybe she is. Do you think she'll say sorry? James looked back at the terminal, at the windows where Christine's silhouette was still visible, still sitting in that chair, still shaking. I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes sorry doesn't come easy for people. It's easy for me. That's because you're braver than most adults. The security cart pulled up, Martinez behind the wheel. He nodded at James. Ready? Let's go. James lifted Emma into the cart and climbed in beside her. As they pulled away from the terminal, Emma looked back over her shoulder at the building growing smaller behind them. Daddy? Yeah? I hope she finds someone to be happy with, so she doesn't have to be mean. James pulled his daughter close, wrapping his arm around her despite the cold, wet shirt between them. Me too, baby. Me too. The cart moved through the rain, heading toward the aircraft waiting on Pad 7. And neither of them knew that inside that terminal, a phone call was being made. A name was being run through databases. And the real storm, the one that had nothing to do with weather, was only beginning to form. 3 hours ago, James had been behind the wheel of his Ford pickup, Emma asleep in the back seat, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Praying for time, for mercy, for just one break in a string of disasters that had started with that phone call at 3 in the morning. The phone call that changed everything. He remembered it perfectly. The way the sound had cut through the darkness of his bedroom, harsh and demanding. The way his heart had stuttered before his hand even reached the nightstand. Phone calls at 3 a.m. were never good news. Phone calls at 3 a.m. when you had a daughter on a transplant list were either miracles or nightmares. And James had learned not to hope for miracles anymore. Mr. Carter? Yes? This is Dr. Morrison at Santa Fe Children's Hospital. We have a match. The words had punched through him like electricity. 3 years. 3 years of false alarms and close calls and hopes that rose only to crash down again. 3 years of watching his daughter grow weaker, smaller, paler. 3 years of holding her hand through hospital visits and telling her everything would be okay when he didn't believe it himself. You have a match, he'd repeated, needing to hear it again. Yes, compatible blood type, tissue markers all align. It's the best match we've seen. A pause. But Mr. Carter, you need to understand. You have 72 hours from this moment. The donor organ has to be harvested, preserved, transported. Emma needs to be in surgery within that window, or we lose it. We'll be there. I don't care what it takes. We'll be there. Your flight is booked. I'm sending the details now. 6 a.m. departure from Newark. James had hung up and sat in the darkness for 30 seconds, letting himself feel it. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, beautiful hope. Then he'd stood and gone to wake his daughter, because they had work to do. Emma had been sleepy and confused, but excited, chattering about finally getting her new heart, about being able to run and play like other kids. She'd dressed herself in the dark while James threw clothes into a duffel bag, and she'd been so proud of doing it all by herself. The mismatched socks hadn't mattered then. Nothing had mattered except getting to that airport. They'd arrived at Newark with 40 minutes to spare. James had felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly as he checked in, got boarding passes, shepherded Emma through security. They were going to make it. Finally, after 3 years of waiting, they were going to make it. Then the announcement. Attention passengers on United Flight 1847 to Albuquerque. Due to mechanical difficulties, this flight has been canceled. Please see a customer service representative for rebooking. James had stared at the departure board, watching their flight number blink from on time to canceled, and felt something crack inside him. Not panic, not yet, just cold, spreading dread. He'd spent 20 minutes arguing with the ticket agent, a tired woman who kept repeating the same script about mechanical failure and passenger safety and the next available flight. 14 hours. The next available flight was in 14 hours. My daughter doesn't have 14 hours, James had said very quietly. I understand your frustration, sir, but no, you don't understand. My daughter is 8 years old. She has a heart condition. There's a donor match waiting in Santa Fe. If we don't get there in time, someone else gets it. Do you understand what I'm saying? The woman's face had softened, but her answer hadn't changed. I'm very sorry, Mr. Carter. but the flight is canceled for safety reasons. I can put you on the next available." James had walked away before she finished. His mind was already working through alternatives, calculating distances and drive times. Newark to Santa Fe, 2,000 miles, 32 hours if he drove straight through without stopping. But Emma was weak, needed rest, needed her medications on schedule, and they didn't have 32 hours to spare. He'd made phone calls, charter services, private pilots, anyone who might be able to get them there faster. Most were already booked. The ones that weren't quoted prices that made his stomach turn, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for an emergency charter, money he didn't have. Then Amy Chen had appeared, the young gate agent with tired eyes and a clipboard. "Mr. Carter, I overheard your situation. There's a private charter leaving from Teterboro tonight. Medical priority transport. I can't promise anything, but I put in a request for you." Teterboro? That was 30 miles away in New Jersey. "I don't understand. Why would—" "Just go. Pad 7. They're expecting you." And because James was desperate and running out of options, he'd gone. Driven those 30 miles, Emma falling asleep against the window, and arrived at the private terminal at Teterboro just as the sun was setting. Now here they were, on a security cart in the rain, heading toward a plane that might or might not save his daughter's life. Martinez was silent as he drove, but James could feel the man's attention on him, assessing, evaluating. "You're military," Martinez said finally. Not a question. James didn't answer. "The way you stood, the way you scanned the room, the way you didn't flinch when Reynolds threw that coffee." Martinez glanced at him. "I've seen enough soldiers to recognize one. I was a lot of things. But not anymore. Not for a long time." They reached the Gulf Stream. It loomed against the gray sky, white and sleek and impossibly expensive. A promise and a threat wrapped together in carbon fiber. Martinez stopped the cart at the foot of the boarding stairs. "Mr. Carter." "Yes?" "That canceled flight of yours, the one that got scrubbed at the last minute?" Martinez kept his voice low. "I made some calls while you were walking out. It wasn't mechanical failure." James felt the cold spread through his chest, and it had nothing to do with his wet clothes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the cancellation came from somewhere unusual. Someone with access to the scheduling system." Martinez paused. "Someone wanted you to miss that flight." "Who?" "I don't know yet. But when one unusual thing happens, it's bad luck. When two unusual things happen," he let the sentence hang, "it's a pattern." "Yeah." Martinez extended his hand. "Safe travels, Mr. Carter. I hope your daughter gets the help she needs." James shook it, grateful for this man who had seen past his clothes to the truth underneath. "Thank you for everything. Just doing my job, the way it's supposed to be done." James nodded, then took Emma's hand and started up the stairs. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through what was left of his dry clothes, plastering his hair to his forehead. At the top of the stairs, he paused and looked back at Martinez one more time. The security chief raised his hand in salute. Then James stepped inside, and the world changed again. The cabin smelled like leather and money. Soft, recessed lighting cast everything in warm gold. Cream-colored seats arranged in configurations that suggested intimate conversations over expensive whiskey. Wood grain accents that probably cost more than James's truck lined the walls. The quiet hum of systems coming online filled the space with the promise of controlled flight, of technology so advanced it made the act of defying gravity seem effortless. A woman stood near the galley, frozen mid-motion with a serving tray trembling in her hands. Linda Hayes, the nameplate on her uniform read. Senior flight attendant, 20 years of experience visible in the practiced way she held herself, despite the shock spreading across her face. She was 45, competent, professional, and currently staring at James like he'd materialized from a nightmare. Her eyes cataloged him in seconds. The coffee-stained flannel shirt, the mud on his work boots, the 3-day beard, the exhausted hollows under his eyes. The little girl beside him, pale and thin, gripping his hand like a lifeline. Every instinct Linda had developed over 2 decades of working private charters was screaming that these people did not belong here. "Excuse me," she managed, her voice coming out higher than intended. "This is a private charter. I'm going to need to see—" "We're boarding." James moved past her, guiding Emma toward a seat by the window. "My daughter gets motion sick. Do you have ginger ale?" Linda stood rooted, tray still in her hands, mouth opening and closing without sound. The cockpit doors swung open, and Captain Sullivan appeared in the doorway, his face unreadable. 50 years old, ex-Navy, the kind of pilot who'd seen enough to know when something felt wrong. "Linda, is there a problem?" The manifest. The manifest is confirmed." Sullivan's eyes moved to James, assessing with the calm calculation of someone trained to evaluate threats at 30,000 feet. "These passengers are cleared. Prepare the cabin for departure." Linda's jaw tightened, but she nodded once and retreated to the galley. James helped Emma settle into her seat, buckling the belt across her lap, tucking a blanket around her legs. She was shivering despite the cabin's warmth. "Here," he murmured. "Lean back. Try to rest." "I'm not tired." "Then close your eyes and pretend." "That's what I do when I can't sleep." A small smile flickered across Emma's face. "That's lying." "It's self-care." James brushed a strand of wet hair from her forehead. "There's a difference." The smile grew slightly, then faded as her eyes found something over his shoulder. James followed her gaze and felt his pulse spike. 3 other passengers occupied the cabin. He'd been so focused on getting Emma settled that he hadn't registered them fully. But now awareness flooded in with the force of professional training he'd thought he'd left behind 15 years ago. An older man sat across the aisle, wool blazer perfectly pressed, leather folio open on his lap, reading glasses perched on his nose. 60-something, careful posture, hands that moved with deliberate precision as he wrote notes in margins. But his eyes kept flicking up to watch James with the studied neutrality of someone cataloging details for later use. At the back of the cabin, a younger man lounged in designer casual wear, expensive sneakers propped against the seat in front of him. Early 30s, phone in hand, thumbs moving across the screen with practiced speed. He looked up as James's eyes found him and smiled. Not friendly, knowing. The smile of someone holding cards they hadn't played yet. And then there was the woman. She sat in the front row business class section, reading what appeared to be a financial report, her profile sharp against the window. 38, maybe, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun that emphasized the elegant line of her neck. Armani suit in charcoal gray, no jewelry except small diamond studs that caught the light when she turned her head. No wedding ring, but a pale band of skin on her left hand suggested recent removal. Victoria Hayes, owner of Hayes Aviation. The woman who owned this aircraft. James knew because Linda had mentioned it while bringing the first aid kit, her voice tight with the kind of deference reserved for people who signed paychecks. Victoria Hayes, CEO, self-made after her husband's death 2 years ago in a plane crash that should have killed her too. She'd been on the ground that day, held back by a last-minute meeting. Sometimes survival was just timing and chance, and the guilt of it could hollow you out from the inside. Victoria looked up as if sensing his attention. Their eyes met across the cabin, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe? Or the awareness of two people who'd both lost more than they could carry. Then she returned to her report without acknowledgement, and James turned back to Emma. "Daddy, that man keeps looking at us." She meant the younger one at the back. James had noticed too, the way his gaze lingered, amused and anticipatory, like watching a show whose ending he already knew. "Stay close to me," James murmured. The engines began their startup sequence, a building whine that Emma felt in her chest. She pressed closer to the window, watching ground crew move around the aircraft with practiced efficiency. 64 hours now. The clock was ticking, and they still had 3 hours and 40 minutes of flight time ahead, plus the drive from the airport to the hospital. Every minute mattered. Linda appeared beside his seat carrying a tray with ginger ale and crackers. "For your daughter, when she wakes up." "Thank you." She set the items down, then hesitated. Her eyes went to his collarbone where the cut from Christine's coffee cup had crusted over with dried blood. "Sir, I have a first aid kit if you'd like me to clean that wound." James studied her face. The discomfort was still there, the sense that he didn't fit in this world of private jets and people who could afford them. But beneath it was something else, professional concern maybe, or just basic human decency winning out over prejudice. "I'd appreciate that." She nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with a white medical kit. She sat in the seat across the aisle and opened it with practiced hands. "May I?" James leaned forward, giving her access to his collarbone. She began cleaning the cut with antiseptic that stung, but he didn't flinch. Her movements were efficient, careful. "You've done this before." 20 years as a flight attendant, you see everything. She applied a small bandage, pressing it gently into place. "Fights, medical emergencies, births once." A pause. "I've never seen someone board a plane looking like they just lost a war." "Felt like one." Linda closed the kit but didn't move. Her voice dropped lower. "That woman in the terminal? The one who threw the coffee? I heard what happened on the radio before we boarded. The ground crew was talking about it." She met his eyes. "I'm sorry." "You didn't do it." "No, but She stopped, looked away. "When you walked in, I assumed—" "That I didn't belong here." Linda's cheeks flushed. "Yes." James nodded slowly. "It's okay." "It's not." "No," he agreed. "But I understand it. You were trained to judge quickly, to categorize, to decide who's safe and who's dangerous based on how they look." He glanced at Emma, sleeping now against the window. "The problem is when we stop there." Linda followed his gaze to the little girl, and her expression softened into something approaching shame. "She's beautiful." "She's everything." "The hospital in Santa Fe. Is it serious?" James was quiet for a long moment. Then the words came out despite his intention to keep them contained. "She needs a new heart." Linda's hand flew to her mouth. 3 years on the waiting list. 3 years of watching her get weaker. His voice remained steady, but something in it made Linda lean closer. "Yesterday we got the call. A match. A real match. But we have to be there in time." "That's why you drove through the night." "Our first flight was canceled 30 minutes before boarding." James's jaw tightened. "Mechanical issue," they said. But I checked after. The plane flew an hour later. Different manifest. Different passengers. Linda frowned. "That doesn't make sense. Why would they—" "I don't know. But someone wanted us to miss that flight." The cabin lights flickered once. Linda's head snapped up, eyes scanning the ceiling with professional wariness. The engines hummed steady, but something in the quality of the sound had changed. Almost imperceptible, but there. Did you feel that? James had. A slight vibration, wrong in a way that made his training kick in. 15 years ago, he would have identified it immediately, categorized the threat, initiated protocols. Now he just sat very still and listened. Mr. Carter, I shouldn't tell you this. Linda's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. But something's wrong with this flight. What do you mean? The manifest was changed 3 times in the last 24 hours. Passengers added, removed, added again. That never happens with sealed charters. Never. She glanced toward the back of the cabin, toward the young man who was still watching them with that knowing smile. And that man? He wasn't on the original list. He was added this morning. James followed her gaze, and cold certainty spread through his chest like ice water. Do you know who he is? His name is Tyler Brennan. Linda swallowed. His father is Victor Brennan. The name hit James like a physical blow. Victor Brennan, CEO of Brennan Medical Industries, competitor for the Hartwell contract that James's company had won last year. The contract that should have been the highlight of James's career, but had instead painted a target on his back. He remembered the confrontation at the medical technology conference, Victor cornering him in a hallway away from witnesses, silver hair, predator's eyes, voice low and dangerous. You stole what was mine, Carter. I won a contract with a better bid. You used connections, pulled strings. I don't know how, but I'll find out. Victor had stepped closer, close enough that James could smell expensive cologne mixed with rage. You'll regret this. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, when you least expect it, you'll understand what it means to cross me. James had dismissed it as the bluster of a sore loser. Threats from men like Victor Brennan were common in the defense contracting world. All bark, no bite, posturing for ego. Now Tyler Brennan sat 30 feet away on a charter flight James hadn't even known about until a few hours ago, smiling like he knew exactly what was coming. Linda. Yes? I need you to do something for me. When we land, I need you to remember this conversation. Every word. Can you do that? Her face paled. Mr. Carter, what's going on? I'm not sure yet. He looked at Tyler, who raised his phone in mock salute, that smile widening. But I'm going to find out. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the speaker, calm and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. You're free to move about the cabin. Flight time to Santa Fe is approximately 3 hours and 40 minutes. We'll keep you updated on weather and conditions as we approach. Tyler stood immediately, stretching with exaggerated casualness, then started walking forward. Not to the lavatory, not to speak with Linda. He stopped right beside James's row and sat down across the aisle without invitation. Mr. Carter. His voice was smooth, educated, the product of expensive schools and a life where consequences were things that happened to other people. Mind if we talk? Actually, I do. Tyler laughed and sat anyway, phone tucked in his pocket, that insufferable smile still in place. Straight to the point. Your daughter is adorable, by the way. Emma stirred in her sleep, and James felt his hands curl into fists. He forced them to relax, forced his breathing to stay even. Losing control would accomplish nothing. We have a lot in common, you and I. both in the medical industry, both flying to the same destination, both on this particular plane at this particular time. Tyler tilted his head. Funny how that works out. Hilarious. You know, my father talks about you a lot. Marcus Cole, the man who came out of nowhere and stole the Hartwell contract right out from under us. I didn't steal anything. We had a better bid. Did you? Tyler's smile never wavered. Or did you just have better connections? Better timing? Better luck? James turned to face him fully, and something in his expression made Tyler's smile falter slightly. If you have something to say it. I'm just curious about the man who's willing to risk everything for a government contract, even his own daughter's health. The words landed like poison. James went very still. Excuse me? 3 years on a transplant list is a long time. A lot can happen in 3 years. Delays, complications, canceled flights. Tyler's voice remained conversational, friendly even, but there was venom underneath. It must be stressful, never knowing if you'll make it in time.
Are you threatening my daughter?
Threatening? Tyler laughed, but it sounded forced now. I'm just making conversation. It's a long flight. We should get to know each other. James leaned forward. The movement was small, but it carried weight, the kind of quiet menace that came from knowing exactly how much damage you could do and choosing restraint instead. Let me be very clear. If anything happens to my daughter, anything at all, I will hold you personally responsible, and there is nowhere on this earth you will be able to hide. For the first time, Tyler's mask slipped. Something like uncertainty flickered across his face, the dawning realization that this man in the coffee-stained shirt might be more dangerous than he appeared. My, such hostility. I was just being friendly. No need to make threats. I don't make threats. No? Tyler stood, brushing invisible lint from his jacket. Then what do you call that? A promise. They held each other's gaze for a long moment. Then Tyler turned and walked back to his seat, the swagger in his step slightly diminished. Emma woke with a small sound of distress. Daddy, that man is scary. I know, sweetheart. Is he going to hurt us? James kissed the top of her head. Not if I can help it. The older man across the aisle cleared his throat. James had almost forgotten about him, which was probably intentional. People who were good at watching knew how to fade into backgrounds. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. James turned to him, wary. I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe you may have a problem. The man closed his folio and extended his hand. Robert Fletcher, retired federal judge. James shook it carefully. What kind of problem? That young man. I've met his father, Victor Brennan. Unpleasant individual, the kind who views business as war and competitors as enemies to be destroyed rather than simply beaten. Fletcher glanced toward the back of the cabin where Tyler had returned to his phone. The kind who doesn't forgive losing. You know about the contract? I know about many things, Mr. Carter. It's my job to know. Or was, before retirement. Fletcher leaned slightly closer. I also know that you're not just a businessman. Not anymore, perhaps. But you were something else once. James said nothing, which was answer enough. The security chief at the terminal, Martinez. He treated you like a VIP. Not because of money, but because of recognition. One veteran to another. Fletcher's eyes were sharp behind his reading glasses. Whatever your history is, it's not my business. But I will tell you this. That young man back there is not here by accident. And neither are you. What do you mean? I mean, this flight feels wrong. I've been flying charters for 30 years, and I've learned to trust my instincts. Fletcher's voice dropped even lower. My instincts are telling me that we're all exactly where someone wants us to be. Before James could respond, the plane lurched. Not violently, just a shudder like something had brushed against them from outside, a wrongness in the smooth flow of pressurized air and controlled flight. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Emma grabbed James's arm. "Daddy!" "It's okay, just turbulence." But Linda had emerged from the galley, her face pale, her eyes moving to the ceiling like she was listening for something. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the speaker, but it was different now, tighter, more controlled. "Folks, we're experiencing some minor atmospheric disturbance. Nothing to worry about. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Fletcher was gripping his armrest with white knuckles. That didn't feel like atmosphere. Another shudder, stronger this time. The lights flickered again, and somewhere in the galley, a glass shattered. Linda cried out, grabbing for a seat back to steady herself. The cabin tilted slightly, corrected, tilted again. "Daddy, what's happening?" James held her tight, his mind racing through scenarios, through possibilities, through the kind of analysis he'd done for 15 years before walking away from it all. "It's going to be okay, baby." But at the back of the cabin, Tyler Brennan wasn't scared, wasn't concerned. He was watching the chaos unfold with an expression that looked almost like satisfaction, like everything was going exactly according to plan. James unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. Emma's hand shot out to grip his. "Daddy, no!" "Stay here. I'll be right back." He looked at Fletcher. "Watch her." The older man nodded, moving to the seat beside Emma as James started toward the back. Linda intercepted him halfway. "Sir, you need to sit down." "Your instruments are being jammed. I need to talk to the captain." Linda's face went white. "What? How do you—" "I used to do this for a living. Aircraft security, counter-interference protocols." The plane shuddered again, harder, and they both grabbed for support. "Whatever's happening, it's not natural, and if I'm right, we have about 10 minutes before it gets worse." Linda stared at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her decision. "The cockpit door is locked. I'll have to call ahead." "Do it." She moved to the intercom while James continued toward Tyler. The younger man watched him approach, no longer amused, starting to look nervous. "Going somewhere?" "Just checking on things." "You know, my father warned me about you. Said you were smarter than you looked. Said you'd be trouble." James heard it then. High-pitched, barely audible beneath the engine noise. A whine that shouldn't exist, coming from somewhere close. Very close. He followed the sound to Tyler's carry-on bag at his feet. "What's in the bag?" "Nothing that concerns you." "Open it." "Make me." James grabbed the bag and yanked it away. Tyler shouted protest, but James was already unzipping it, and as the contents became visible, he felt ice spread through his veins. A small black device, roughly the size of a smartphone, warm to the touch, a tiny blue light blinking on its surface in steady pulses, and through a small transparent window, he could see the serial number, the specific configuration of components that he recognized because he'd helped design the countermeasures against them 15 years ago. "This is a signal jammer. Aviation grade. Designed to disrupt flight systems." Tyler lunged for it. "Give that back! I wrote the handbook on these systems." James's voice had gone deadly quiet. "I literally designed the countermeasures for the military. I know exactly what this is and what it does." The plane bucked violently, the worst one yet. The lights died completely, plunging them into darkness for 3 eternal seconds before the emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in dim red glow. Someone screamed, the engines shrieked with strain, and 20 years of control, of holding everything locked down inside, of being calm and measured and in control, all of it shattered in one terrible moment. "You brought a weapon onto this aircraft!" James's voice erupted with force that shocked even him. "You're trying to crash this plane. My daughter is on this plane." Tyler scrambled backward, genuine fear replacing the smug confidence. "Look, I wasn't going to. It was just supposed to. My little girl. My whole world. The only thing I have left of my wife." James's voice cracked with the weight of 3 years of fear, of loss, of desperate love that had nowhere to go. "And you spoiled, arrogant, pathetic excuse for a human being. You put a device on board that could kill her." The cabin had gone silent, except for the shriek of stressed engines and the whine of the device still active in James's hands. Everyone was frozen, watching, and in that moment, James felt something in him break open that he'd kept sealed since Rachel's funeral. Tyler held up his hands, trembling. "I didn't mean... My father said it was just supposed to delay the flight, force an emergency landing. You'd be stuck on the ground for hours. And by the time I got another plane, my daughter would be dead." Tyler's face went gray. I didn't think... No, you didn't." The plane bucked again, sustained and violent. James looked at the device in his hands, at the blinking blue light, at the components he recognized from another life. His fingers found the small toggle switch on the side, almost invisible against the black casing. But he hesitated. What if Tyler was lying? What if flipping it triggered a failsafe? What if... "Daddy!" Emma's voice cut through everything, terrified and desperate. James looked up to see her standing in the aisle despite Fletcher's attempts to hold her back, tears streaming down her face. He flipped the switch. The blue light died. The whine stopped. And slowly, agonizingly slowly, the plane began to steady. The emergency lights brightened slightly. The engines settled back into their normal rhythm. The shuddering faded to nothing. In the sudden relative quiet, James could hear his own breathing, ragged and harsh. He looked at Tyler, who was pressed back against his seat, all the arrogance stripped away, leaving only a frightened child in expensive clothes. "Please, I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." "Save it for the police." James turned and walked back toward Emma. She ran to him and he caught her, lifting her into his arms, even though she was too big to carry anymore, holding her tight while she sobbed against his shoulder. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. It's over. I promise." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. This was just the beginning. Victoria Hayes had stood during the chaos, her financial report forgotten on the floor. Now she walked toward them, her face carefully composed, but something burning in her eyes that James couldn't quite read. "Mr. Carter?" He looked at her over Emma's shoulder. "Give me the device." James hesitated, then handed it over. Victoria examined it with a kind of professional competence that surprised him, her fingers finding the components, the serial numbers, the modification points. "This is military grade. JAM X7, modified for civilian aircraft frequencies." She looked up at him. "Where did you learn to recognize this?" "Long time ago. Different life." You worked for the government. It wasn't a question. James didn't answer, which was answer enough. Victoria turned toward Tyler, and her voice when she spoke carried the kind of authority that came from running a company worth hundreds of millions. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to need you to stay in your seat for the remainder of this flight. If you move, if you speak, if you so much as breathe wrong, I will personally ensure that the federal charges you're facing include attempted murder of everyone on this aircraft. Do you understand? Tyler nodded mutely. Linda appeared with zip ties, the kind kept for emergency restraints. James helped secure Tyler's wrists to the armrest while the younger man sat in shock, tears starting to leak from his eyes. Fletcher had returned to his seat, but was watching everything with the careful attention of a judge evaluating testimony. When James met his eyes, the older man nodded once in what might have been approval, or might have been simple acknowledgement of what he'd witnessed. James carried Emma back to their seats and helped her buckle in. She was still shaking, still crying softly. Is it really over? The worst part is, he brushed tears from her cheeks. We're going to make it to Santa Fe, I promise. She nestled against him, and within minutes, exhaustion pulled her back toward sleep. James sat holding her, feeling his own adrenaline start to fade, leaving behind exhaustion so profound it felt like it reached his bones. 61 hours. They had 61 hours left. Victoria Hayes sat down across the aisle. She'd composed herself completely now, the moment of action replaced by cool professional control. When we land, there will be federal authorities waiting. They'll want statements from everyone, but especially you. I know. Your daughter goes to the hospital first. Everything else can wait. Victoria studied him for a long moment. You would have crashed this plane rather than let that device keep running. No, I would have died stopping it from crashing. There's a difference. Yes. She nodded slowly, and something in her expression shifted. Not quite warmth, but recognition, understanding. My husband died in a plane crash 2 years ago. Mechanical failure, they said. But I've always wondered. She looked at the device still in her hands. If someone wanted him gone badly enough. I'm sorry. Don't be. He would have done exactly what you just did. Victoria stood. I'm going to speak with the captain. Make sure they know what happened, what to tell the authorities. She walked toward the cockpit, and James was left alone with his sleeping daughter and his racing thoughts. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the speaker minutes later. Albuquerque Center, this is November 77 X-ray. Be advised, we have a security situation on board. One passenger has been restrained. We've recovered an interference device that was affecting our systems. Requesting priority handling to Santa Fe and federal authorities on arrival. A pause, then the radio crackled back. Copy that, 77 X-ray. Understand security situation. Squawking emergency. Negative on the emergency. Requesting priority handling only. We are continuing to destination. Sullivan's voice was calm but firm. Santa Fe, ETA approximately 2 hours, 30 minutes. James closed his eyes and let himself feel it. Relief, gratitude, hope. They were going to make it. Linda brought him water, her hand still shaking slightly. In 20 years, I've never seen anything like that. Hopefully you never will again. Mr. Carter, what you did, you saved all of us. I saved my daughter. The rest of you were just along for the ride. But Linda shook her head. No, you saved all of us, and I want you to know. I'm sorry. For how I looked at you when you boarded. For what I assumed. James reached out and squeezed her hand briefly. You're not the first person to make that mistake today. Probably won't be the last. She nodded and returned to the galley, Fletcher leaned across the aisle. That was well done. Which part? All of it. The recognition, the action, the restraint. Fletcher's voice dropped. Most men would have beaten that boy bloody. I thought about it. But you didn't, because your daughter was watching. James looked at Emma sleeping peacefully now, her breathing steady. Everything I do, every choice I make, she's watching. Someday she'll understand what happened today, and I want her to remember that her father chose justice over revenge. Your wife would be proud. The words hit harder than James expected. He swallowed against the sudden tightness in his throat. I hope so. The remainder of the flight passed in strange quiet. Tyler sat slumped in his seat, hands secured, staring at nothing. Victoria returned to her financial reports, but James noticed she kept glancing at Emma, something unreadable in her expression. Fletcher wrote in his folio with the careful precision of someone documenting events for later testimony. And James held his daughter and watched the clouds slide past the window, counting down the minutes until they landed. His phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. Victor Brennan arrested at his home 20 minutes ago. Full federal charges pending. Thought you'd want to know. Agent Mitchell, FBI. James stared at the message, read it twice, then deleted it. Justice was coming, but it felt distant and abstract compared to the weight of Emma in his arms, the warmth of her breath against his chest, the simple fact that she was alive, and they were almost there, almost safe, almost home. But as the lights of Santa Fe began to appear below them, scattered across the desert like fallen stars, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something larger, something that would reach far beyond one canceled flight and one desperate father and one little girl who just wanted to live. The wheels touched down at Santa Fe Regional Airport at 8:02 in the evening. Not a perfect landing. There was a shimmy, a momentary resistance that made everyone grip their armrests, but solid, safe, final. The engines roared in reverse thrust, and the aircraft slowed, taxiing toward a section of tarmac where James could already see them waiting through the window. Police cars with lights throwing blue and red across wet pavement. Federal vehicles, dark SUVs with government plates. An ambulance, its lights already flashing even though they hadn't stopped yet. Emma pressed her face to the glass, her breath fogging the window. Daddy, look! There are so many cars. They're here to help, sweetheart. All of them? All of them. She turned to look up at him with those green eyes, Rachel's eyes, and smiled. The first real smile he'd seen from her in days, untainted by pain or fear or the weight of knowing her body was failing. We made it. James pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her failing heart against his chest. We made it. The aircraft stopped, the engines powered down, and in the sudden quiet, Tyler Brennan's voice cut through from the back of the cabin, high and brittle and breaking. You think this is over? This isn't over. My father has lawyers, senators, people you can't even... Sir? A voice from the front, firm and federal. 2 agents had boarded the moment the door opened, moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from doing this hundreds of times. You'll have an opportunity to speak with your attorney. Right now, I need you to remain silent and comply with instructions. One of them was a woman in her 40s, sharp eyes and sharper suit, the kind of presence that filled a room without effort. She walked directly to James while her partner secured Tyler. Mr. Carter, I'm Agent Sarah Mitchell, FBI. We need to talk. I know. James looked past her to the ambulance visible through the window. But first, your daughter, yes. Mitchell's expression softened fractionally. The medical team is standing by. We've been in contact with the hospital. They're ready for her. Then let me take her to them, please. Everything else can wait. Mitchell studied him for a long moment, taking in the coffee-stained flannel, the dried blood on his collarbone, the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Whatever she saw there made her nod. Go. We'll follow. James stood, lifting Emma into his arms. She was too big to carry now, had been for years. But she wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. In that moment, she was his baby again, the tiny pink-faced miracle Rachel had placed in his arms 8 years ago, when the world was still whole. He walked down the aisle past the agents, past Linda, who stood with tears streaming down her face, past Judge Fletcher, who nodded once in silent acknowledgement. At the cabin door, he paused. Victoria Hayes stood there, having materialized from her seat with the device still in her hands. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, calculation mixed with something that might have been respect or might have been curiosity. Mr. Carter. He waited. When this is over, when your daughter is safe, she paused. Come find me. We need to talk about what happened on my aircraft. Is that a threat? It's an invitation. Victoria's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You saved everyone on this plane, including me. That deserves more than a handshake and a dismissal. James shifted Emma's weight slightly. I don't need thanks. Good, because I'm not offering them. I'm offering a job. She held up the device. Someone with your particular expertise might be useful to an aviation company trying to prevent this from ever happening again. Before he could respond, she stepped aside, clearing the path. James carried Emma down the stairs into the cool desert night, rain having given way to clear skies scattered with stars. The paramedics were waiting at the bottom, a young woman with kind eyes stepping forward. Mr. Carter, we'll take good care of her. I know. He kissed Emma's forehead one last time, breathing in the scent of her, memorizing the weight of her in his arms. I'll see you at the hospital, sweetheart. I promise. You always keep your promises. Her voice was already sleepy, the adrenaline of the flight giving way to the exhaustion that had been building for 3 years. Always. He set her down on the stretcher, watched the paramedics secure her with gentle efficiency, watched the ambulance doors close. Then he stood on the tarmac in the cold New Mexico night and watched the vehicle drive away, with everything that mattered in his life. Agent Mitchell appeared beside him. Mr. Carter. He didn't turn. Is there somewhere private we can talk? There is. Good. She gestured toward one of the federal vehicles. Because I'm about to tell you a story about a man named Victor Brennan, and when I'm done, you're going to want him arrested. James finally looked at her. That's a strong statement. I have strong evidence. Mitchell pulled out her phone, brought up a message thread, including texts threatening your daughter's life, sent from a number that traces back to Brennan Medical Industries' executive offices. She showed him the screen. The messages were there, time-stamped, documented, preserved. This could be significant. It's more than significant. It's proof. Mitchell's voice hardened. That man tried to kill your daughter. Not directly. He's too smart for that. But he sent his son with a device designed to crash that plane. He arranged for your first flight to be canceled. He did everything he could to ensure you never reached the hospital in time. Why? Because you beat him. Last year, your company won a contract he wanted. He couldn't accept losing, so he decided to destroy you instead. She tucked the phone away. He just didn't count on you fighting back. James was silent for a moment, processing. Then he looked toward the horizon, where the city lights of Santa Fe glowed against the dark. My daughter is in an ambulance right now, heading toward a surgery that will either save her life or end it. Victor Brennan doesn't matter. The contract doesn't matter. Nothing matters except getting her through the next 12 hours alive. I understand, but Mr. Carter, we need your statement. You'll get it. Everything you need, I'll give you. He met Mitchell's eyes. But not tonight. Tonight, I need to be with my daughter. Mitchell studied him, then nodded. We have Tyler. We have the device. We have enough to hold Victor on conspiracy charges. She handed him a business card. Call me when you're ready. We'll do this the right way. A car pulled up, driven by a young agent who looked barely old enough to shave. Mitchell opened the back door. We'll take you to the hospital. The drive through Santa Fe took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. James sat in the back seat watching the city slide past, adobe buildings and narrow streets lit by street lamps that threw pools of gold onto wet pavement. He'd been here once before, years ago with Rachel, back when they thought they had all the time in the world. They'd walked through the plaza, bought cheap turquoise jewelry from vendors, eaten sopapillas dripping with honey. Rachel had laughed at something, her head thrown back, sunlight catching in her hair, and James had thought in that moment that he was the luckiest man alive. 3 years later, she'd be dead from cancer that consumed her faster than anyone thought possible. And now he was back in this city, chasing another miracle for their daughter, hoping lightning could strike twice. The hospital was modern glass and steel, incongruous against the traditional Southwestern architecture surrounding it. James was escorted through automatic doors into a waiting area where a doctor stood ready, surgical scrubs already on, mask hanging around her neck. Mr. Carter, I'm Dr. Morrison. We spoke on the phone. He shook her hand. How is she? She's being prepped now. The surgical team is assembled. The donor heart is in excellent condition. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. Morrison's voice was calm, professional, but there was warmth underneath. Your daughter is a fighter, Mr. Carter. She's going to do well. Can I see her? Before you start? Of course. Follow me. She led him through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, past rooms where other families waited for their own miracles or tragedies. The pre-op area was quieter, curtained spaces where patients rested before being wheeled to surgery. Emma was in the third bay, already in a hospital gown, an IV in her small arm. But she was awake, and when she saw James, her face lit up. Daddy! He went to her bedside and took her hand, careful not to disturb the IV line. Hey, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Weird. They gave me medicine that makes everything fuzzy. She giggled, then her expression turned serious. Daddy, I'm scared. I know, baby. What if it doesn't work? What if... Then we'll figure it out. Together. Like we always do. He brushed hair from her forehead. But Emma, listen to me. This is going to work. You're going to wake up with a strong, healthy heart. You're going to run and play and do all the things you've been dreaming about. You promise? The words caught in his throat because he couldn't promise. Couldn't guarantee anything when it came to surgery and chance and the fragile mystery of the human body. But Emma was looking at him with complete trust, needing him to be certain, even if he wasn't. I promise. She smiled and closed her eyes. I had another dream about Mommy last night. Yeah? What happened? She said everything was going to be okay. She said you'd make sure. Emma's eyes opened again, drowsy now from the pre-medication. Was she right? James felt his throat tighten, tears burning behind his eyes that he refused to let fall. She was always right, baby. That's what made her special. I miss her. Me too. A nurse appeared, checking monitors, preparing to wheel Emma to surgery. Morrison touched James's shoulder gently. We need to take her now. James nodded. He leaned down and kissed Emma's forehead, her cheek, her small hand. I'll be right here when you wake up. I'm not going anywhere. I know. Her voice was fading, the medication pulling her under. You always keep your promises. They wheeled her away, and James stood watching until she disappeared around a corner. Then he walked to the waiting room and sank into a plastic chair and let himself feel everything he'd been holding back for the past 36 hours. Fear, exhaustion, hope so sharp it felt like pain. He pulled out his phone and stared at the dark screen for a long moment. Then he opened his messages and scrolled to Rachel's contact, still saved even though she'd been dead for 3 years, and typed out words he would never send. Our daughter is in surgery right now, getting the heart you always prayed she'd receive. I hope you're watching. I hope you know I did everything I could to get her here. I love you. I miss you. I wish you were here to see her wake up. He didn't hit send, just sat there holding the phone, reading the words over and over until they blurred. Mr. Carter. James looked up. Judge Fletcher stood in the doorway of the waiting room, still wearing his wool blazer despite the late hour, looking tired but determined. Judge, what are you doing here? I wanted to make sure Emma was all right, and to speak with you, if you have a moment. James gestured to the empty chair beside him. Fletcher sat with a small groan, the sound of a man whose back had carried too many years. I owe you an apology. For what? For not doing more on that plane. When Tyler was taunting you, when everything was falling apart, I sat there and watched. I held your daughter's hand and told her it would be okay, but I didn't confront Brennan. I didn't try to stop him. Fletcher's voice was heavy with regret. I just observed. You protected Emma. That was more than enough. Was it? The judge shook his head. I've spent my whole life observing, Mr. Carter, staying neutral, avoiding conflicts that didn't directly concern me. It's how you survive in the judicial system. It's how you maintain integrity. He paused. But watching you today, the way you acted without hesitation, without calculation of personal cost, it made me realize that neutrality can be its own kind of cowardice. James didn't know what to say to that. He turned the phone over in his hands, Rachel's unsent message still on the screen. You did what you could with what you had. That's all any of us can do. Your daughter asked me if I had children, while you were dealing with Tyler. Fletcher's voice softened. I told her I had a son. Had, past tense. He died in Afghanistan 7 years ago. IED on a road outside Kandahar. I'm sorry. He was brave, like you. The kind of man who runs toward danger when everyone else runs away.
Fletcher met James's eyes.
When I saw you move toward Tyler, knowing that device could bring down the plane at any moment, all I could think was, that's what Daniel would have done.
They sat in silence for a moment. Two men bound by loss and the strange kinship of having survived when others didn't.
Judge Fletcher, when this goes to trial, and it will go to trial, I'm going to need someone who witnessed everything to testify. I'll be there. Every word I saw, every action I observed. I'll put it on record.
Fletcher stood, offering his hand.
It's the least I can do.
James shook it, grateful for this man who'd chosen in the end to step out of neutrality and into the messy business of taking sides.
Thank you. Take care of your daughter, Mr. Carter. And when she wakes up, tell her Judge Fletcher said she was the bravest person on that plane. He left, and James was alone again with the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of hospital machinery keeping people alive. He checked his watch. Surgery would take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. It was 9:30 now. He could be sitting here until dawn. The door opened again. This time it was Victoria Hayes. She'd changed out of her Armani suit into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back in that severe bun. She looked younger this way, more human, though her eyes still carried that calculating intelligence. Miss Hayes. Victoria, please. She sat down without asking permission, crossing her legs, studying him with that same unreadable expression from the plane. I wanted to check on Emma. She's in surgery, won't know anything for hours. I'll wait. James turned to look at her fully. Why? Because today on my aircraft, I watched a man risk everything to save his daughter, and it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Victoria's voice was quiet but steady. What it means to care about something more than profit margins and quarterly reports. You didn't strike me as someone who'd forgotten that. My husband died 2 years ago. After that, I threw myself into work, built Hayes Aviation from a small charter service into one of the premier private carriers in the Southwest. She smiled without humor. I told myself it was to honor his memory, but really it was because work doesn't hurt the way grief does. James understood that better than he wanted to. Today, when Tyler activated that device, when the plane started to fail, all I could think was, this is how Michael felt. Those last seconds before the crash, knowing he was going to die, helpless to stop it. Victoria's hands were shaking slightly. And then you stood up. You moved toward the threat instead of away from it. You saved all of us. I saved my daughter. You were collateral benefit.
No.
Victoria leaned forward. You saved everyone on that plane, Mr. Carter, including me. And I don't forget debts like that. I don't want your money. Good, because I'm not offering it. She pulled a business card from her pocket and held it out. I'm offering you a position. Director of Aviation Security for Hayes Aviation. Salary negotiable, full benefits, and the authority to implement whatever protocols you think necessary to prevent what happened today from ever happening again. James stared at the card without taking it. You don't know anything about me. I know you have expertise in aircraft security systems that most people don't even know exist. I know you recognized a military-grade jamming device on site. I know you disabled it under pressure when most people would have panicked. Victoria's eyes were sharp. And I know that the FBI is very interested in your background, which suggests you worked for the government in a capacity that isn't public record. That life is over. Is it? Or did you just walk away because you had other priorities? She gestured at the surgical suite somewhere beyond the waiting room walls. Your daughter needed you more than your country did. That's not running away, Mr. Carter. That's choosing what matters most. Before James could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Agent Mitchell. Tyler Brennan is talking. Full confession in exchange for immunity from attempted murder charges. He's giving us everything on his father. Recordings, emails, documentation of the entire conspiracy. Victor is finished. James read it twice, then looked up at Victoria. They got him. Victor Brennan. Tyler turned on his father. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Satisfaction, maybe? Or vindication? Good. Men like Victor Brennan think their money makes them untouchable. It's satisfying when they're proven wrong. She stood. Think about my offer, Mr. Carter. No pressure, no timeline. But when you're ready to consider what comes next, after Emma is healthy and life settles into something approaching normal, call me. She left the business card on the chair beside him and walked out, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. James picked up the card. Victoria Hayes, CEO, Hayes Aviation. A phone number, an email address, an offer of work that would pull him back into a world he'd left behind when Rachel got sick. He tucked it into his wallet without deciding anything. The hours crawled past. James alternated between sitting and pacing, between staring at his phone and putting it away, between hope and fear in cycles that left him dizzy. Other families came and went, receiving their news, good or bad, their faces telling the story before words could. Around midnight, Agent Mitchell appeared with coffee and questions. James gave his statement, recounting everything from the canceled flight to the device in Tyler's bag to the moment the plane steadied. Mitchell recorded it all, asked clarifying questions, promised she'd be in touch about the trial. Victor Brennan is being held without bail. Federal charges include conspiracy to commit murder, domestic terrorism, and about 15 other counts we're still working through. She closed her notepad. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, Mr. Carter. You made sure of that. I made sure my daughter had a chance to live. Everything else is just consequence. Mitchell nodded, understanding perhaps better than most the difference between justice and survival. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She left, and James returned to waiting, to the slow torture of minutes that felt like hours. He thought about Rachel, about the promise he'd made at her funeral to protect Emma no matter what. He thought about Christine Reynolds and the coffee cup and the ugly prejudice that lived in people's hearts. He thought about Tyler Brennan crying in his restraints and Victor Brennan in a federal holding cell, and how quickly privilege could crumble when consequences finally arrived. But mostly he thought about Emma, her smile, her courage, the way she'd asked if Christine Reynolds would be okay, even after everything. The wisdom she carried that seemed impossible in someone so young. At 4:17 in the morning, Dr. Morrison emerged from the surgical suite. Her mask was down, and there was blood on her scrubs, but her face was tired in the way that came after success, not failure. James was on his feet before she reached him. "Mr. Carter," she smiled, "the surgery was successful." The words hit him like a physical force. His knees buckled, and he grabbed the back of a chair to stay upright. "She's stable. The new heart is functioning beautifully. She'll need to stay in the ICU for the next several days, and there's a long recovery ahead." Morrison's smile widened. "But she's going to be okay." James couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stand there while 3 years of fear and hope and desperate prayer crashed over him in waves that threatened to pull him under. Tears streamed down his face, hot and unstoppable. "Can I see her?" "She's still unconscious from the anesthesia, but yes, come with me." Morrison led him through secured doors to the ICU, a hushed space of beeping monitors and soft-soled shoes and the constant vigilance of machines keeping watch over fragile lives. Emma was in the third bay, pale against white sheets, tubes and wires connecting her to equipment that tracked every heartbeat, every breath. But her chest was rising and falling with steady rhythm. The monitor showed a heartbeat strong and regular, no longer the struggling flutter of a failing organ, but the powerful pump of health. James sank into the chair beside her bed and took her hand, careful not to disturb the IV lines.
"Hey, sweetheart, Daddy's here. I told you I'd be here when you woke up."
His voice broke. "I keep my promises, remember?" Emma didn't respond, couldn't respond, but her fingers twitched slightly in his grip, and James could have sworn he felt her squeeze back. He sat there through the night, holding her hand, watching her breathe, waiting for her to wake up. The sky outside the window gradually lightened from black to gray to the pale pink of desert dawn. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications, speaking in quiet voices that didn't disturb the sacred space of healing. At 7:23 in the morning, Emma's eyes fluttered open. "Daddy?" James leaned forward, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "I'm here, baby. Right here." "Did we make it?" "We made it." She smiled, weak and tired, but real. "I knew we would. You promised." James kissed her forehead, her cheek, her small hand still wrapped in his. "I always keep my promises." "I know." Her eyes drifted closed again, but the smile stayed. "That's what makes you my daddy." She fell back asleep, peaceful now in a way she hadn't been in years, her body finally getting the rest it desperately needed. James sat beside her, watching over her like he had for 8 years, like he would for 8 more, and 80 after that, if given the chance. For as long as he had breath in his body and strength in his heart, his daughter was alive. Nothing else mattered. 3 weeks passed. Emma grew stronger every day, the doctors marveling at how well her body accepted the new heart, how quickly she regained color and energy. She laughed again, really laughed, the sound filling her hospital room with joy that had been absent for too long. James rarely left her side. He slept in the chair beside her bed, ate whatever the nurses brought him, and watched his daughter come back to life, one breath at a time. On the 20th day, a letter arrived at the hospital addressed to James Carter. The return address was a county jail in New York. He opened it carefully, already knowing who it was from. "Mr. Carter, I know I have no right to contact you. I know what I did was unforgivable. I assaulted you, traumatized your daughter, nearly cost her life because of my prejudice and pride. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I was fired. I'm facing criminal charges. My name is everywhere as the woman who attacked a father trying to save his dying child. I deserve all of it. Worse, probably. But I needed you to know. I understand now what I did and why it was wrong. You weren't a threat. You were a desperate father who would do anything for his daughter, and I tried to destroy you for it. I've started volunteering at a homeless shelter, helping people who look like you did that day. People I would have judged, dismissed, stepped over. It won't erase what I did, but it's a start. I hope Emma is recovering. I hope someday you can tell her that the woman who hurt you asked for a second chance, and maybe, eventually, deserved it. Christine Reynolds. James read the letter twice, then set it aside. He wouldn't respond, wouldn't reach out, wouldn't offer absolution that wasn't his to give. But he wouldn't throw it away either. He'd keep it, and someday when Emma was old enough to understand, he'd show it to her and let her decide what forgiveness looked like. 6 months later, James stood in a federal courtroom and testified against Victor Brennan. He recounted the canceled flight, the threatening messages, the device on the plane, Tyler's confession. Judge Fletcher testified about what he'd witnessed. Linda Hayes testified about the manifest changes. Agent Mitchell presented recordings Tyler had made of his father's instructions. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Victor Brennan was convicted on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, domestic terrorism, federal aviation violations. The judge sentenced him to 40 years in federal prison, more than he would live to complete. Tyler Brennan received 5 years for his cooperation, reduced from 20. He would serve 3 with good behavior and spend the rest of his life knowing he'd destroyed his father to save himself. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions that James ignored. He walked to his truck, the same battered Ford that had carried him and Emma across the country, and drove back to their house in Newark. Emma was waiting on the front porch, healthy and glowing, running to meet him as he pulled into the driveway. 9 years old now, taller and stronger, able to run without getting winded for the first time in her life. "Daddy, how did it go?" He caught her in a hug, lifting her off her feet. Justice was served. "Does that mean the bad man is in jail?" "For a very long time." "Good." She pulled back to look at him seriously. "Mommy would be proud of you." James felt his throat tighten. "You think so?" "I know so. I dreamed about her last night. She said you were the bravest person she ever knew. And she was right." They went inside together, and James made dinner while Emma did homework at the kitchen table, and everything was beautifully, perfectly ordinary in a way that felt like the greatest miracle of all. 1 year after the flight, James and Emma stood in an airport terminal. Not a private terminal this time, a regular one, crowded and noisy and wonderfully normal. They were flying to visit Rachel's parents in Colorado, Emma's first trip since the surgery. "Daddy, look!" Emma pointed at the departures board where their flight was listed. "On time, gate 23. "I see it, sweetheart." "We're really going." "We're really going." She grinned, full and bright, the smile of a healthy child with a strong heart and a whole life ahead of her. They walked through the terminal together, past security, past coffee shops and bookstores, past crowds of travelers heading to their own destinations. A woman in a uniform stopped them near the boarding area. "Excuse me, are you James Carter?" James tensed, old instincts kicking in. "Yes?" The woman smiled. "I'm Amy Chen. I don't know if you remember me, from the terminal that night." James blinked, recognition flooding in. The young gate agent who'd spoken up when it mattered, who'd fought Christine Reynolds' cruelty with simple truth. "Amy, of course I remember." "I got promoted." She gestured to the manager's badge on her uniform. "After everything that happened, the company did a full review. They decided they needed people who would do the right thing even when it's hard." She knelt down to Emma's level. "Hi, sweetheart. I met your daddy on a really difficult day." Emma tilted her head. "Was it the day the mean lady threw coffee?" Amy's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, it was. Daddy says you were brave. You spoke up for us." "I don't know about brave. I just did what I should have done." "That's what brave is," Emma said, matter of fact. "Doing the right thing, even when you're scared." Amy's eyes filled with tears. "You're a very smart kid. I learned it from my mommy." Emma patted Amy's arm. "Thank you for helping us." They boarded the plane together, finding their seats in coach. Nothing special. But to James, it felt like everything. He helped Emma buckle in, watching her press her face to the window with wonder. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "Do you think Mommy can see us?" James looked out at the tarmac, at planes coming and going, at the endless blue sky waiting above. "I think she's always watching." "Me too." Emma nestled against his arm. "I think she's proud of us." "Why do you say that?" "Because we didn't give up. Even when everything was hard and scary, we kept going." She looked up at him.
"That's what Mommy would have wanted."
James pulled her close. That's exactly what she would have wanted. The engines roared to life. The plane began to move, taxiing toward the runway, building speed, lifting off into clear skies. And as they climbed through clouds toward the sun, James felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, not the end of challenges, but the quiet certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. A father and his daughter. Survivors. Fighters. Family. Emma pressed her face to the window, drinking in the view.
"Daddy, look! You can see everything from up here. The houses are so tiny, and the cars, and the people."
She turned to him, wonder in her eyes.
"We're so high up."
"We are."
"But I'm not scared."
"No?"
"No."
She took his hand.
"Because you're with me."
James squeezed her fingers. Always. They flew on toward family waiting with open arms, toward a future bright with possibility, toward life unfolding in ways Rachel never got to see, but had believed in anyway. And as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, James made one final promise. Not to Rachel, who was gone, not to Emma, who was here, but to himself. He would live. He would love. He would keep fighting for what mattered. He would remember that the world held both Christine Reynolds and Amy Chen, people who judged and people who spoke up, cruelty and courage existing side by side. And he would teach his daughter to recognize the difference, to choose kindness over fear, to believe in second chances without forgetting first impressions. The plane carried them forward into the night, and James Carter held his daughter's hand and smiled. Because against all odds, against all enemies, against everything that had tried to stop them, they had made it. And they were going to be okay.